Is this the basic strategy of Exxon and other major fossil fuel companies?
Yes, it is, and it's what we've sometimes referred to as misdirection, to try to distract attention away from the basic facts into some distracting issue.
Climate change, first of all, is not the problem. Climate change is a symptom of the underlying problem of a social species finding a bolus of fossil carbon that is giving us right now in 2022 the equivalent of 500 billion human labor equivalents added to our 5 billion real human laborers. And so to solve climate change with growth is pretty much an oxymoron.
We often start our presentations with this quote by E.O. Wilson, the Harvard sociobiologist, who said, "The real problem of humanity is that we have Paleolithic emotions or brains, medieval institutions, and godlike technology."
There's no doubt we're living in some of the most chaotic, turbulent, and transitionary times any humans have ever experienced. We are transitioning from an old world, currently transitioning, into a new world. So we're going to have to figure out how to wield the godlike power of the internet to forward escape away from dystopia and away from catastrophe to some third attractor. Can we carve out a sensible corner on the internet? That's the question. If we can't, we can't. But I think we should give it a bash, at least. So, let's just quickly run through what the world once looked like. The old world. We had legacy mass media platforms. They would distribute information to the population. Information that the citizens of the earth may have needed to hear. Notable events or phenomena that have occurred at some point across the globe that may affect their lives in some way. Legacy mass media once fulfilled that function. So I wasn't around during the time, so I'm just guessing here pretty much. We come into our time, this transitionary period, and we get the emergence of social media platforms. Social media platforms differ in many regards from legacy mass media platforms, but the interaction of the social media platforms and the legacy mass media platforms has led to this incessant bombardment of negative ecological information. This continual drip feeding, or I wouldn't say drip feeding, it's like a fire hose, and it's a proper, we're just getting blasted out of it with negative ecological information. So in their interaction, the LMMs and the SMs, this effect has arisen of just incessant bombardment. But there are gems within that bombardment, and this is the trick. Well, one of the many tricks we're going to have to figure out. How do we wield the power of the internet to more accurately distinguish between those stories that are just fear-mongering and propagandistic techniques and those stories that actually deserve to be heard and deserve to gain wider attention? So there's this concept of the uncanny valley. I think it was popularised by David Fuller, the journalist and filmmaker who founded rebel wisdom, but rebel wisdom is now gone. But the uncanny valley it refers to the delta between the content that legacy mass media platforms present and the somewhat heterodox alternative content that is presented in social media. One of the effects that this has on individuals who are clued in is that there's a sort of I don't want to say cognitive dissonance, but there is some uneasiness in the individual who reads certain articles, views certain videos online, alternative heterodox videos and articles, and then understands that they're quite consequential somewhere in the globe, and perhaps even for individuals within modern society in the West. These articles and videos could be consequential, but they're not being presented on the legacy mass media platforms, and so this sows within the individual some form of discomfort and doubt. So that's something we're going to have to, or that's an effect that this uncanny valley, the delta between the LMMs and the content on the SMs, has. So an example of one of those highly consequential topics or subjects or phenomena, events that has arisen in the heterodox social media platform space is the presence of PFAS chemicals, per and polyfluoroalkylated substances, in concentrations in rainwater globally, in concentrations that far exceed EPA limits. So because these chemicals, otherwise known as forever chemicals, because there are no known breakdown pathways in nature, these forever chemicals get into the rainwater. They inevitably find their way into the drinking water supply too. And then when we consume them, we humans, they find their way into our endocrine system. And this is the strange thing about content you find on social media platforms and content you find, or the absence of that content on the legacy mass media platforms. This is so highly consequential. These forever chemicals are finding their way into the human body, human bodies across the board, getting into the endocrine system and disrupting hormonal processes, hormonal cascades, disrupting them somewhere in the chain of events, the chain of complex events that occurs within human physiology. That's huge. This could potentially be a factor in many of today's problems that stunt medical scientists, or stump medical scientists, or confuse people, you know. But because this content isn't being more widely distributed, I think people fail to make causal connections with these hyper novel threats like the forever chemicals and diseases and malfunctions or dysfunctions of the human body for which we can't find a cause. So, PFAS is an example. One of many. But then there's another problem that we're going to have to deal with if we're going to figure out how to appropriately wield the godlike power that is granted to us by the internet. This being the problem of the business model used by the social media platforms being engagement based. So it then just shows content that is either inflammatory and limbic system hijack content, or it's just purely entertaining, trivial content that just keeps you scrolling like a mindless robot. Your newsfeed being populated by content that is inflammatory and limbic system hijack in nature, being populated disproportionately by this sort of inflammatory content, will no doubt lead you as a human being with a Paleolithic brain and emotions to imagine that disproportionate newsfeed view of reality is accurately reflective of the reality in the real world that you inhabit beyond your technological devices. This, no doubt, will lead you to behave in certain ways that you otherwise wouldn't. So the point I'm trying to make here is the distortion of reality that comes with these technological devices and the way that the businesses behind them run their businesses carries over to the real world and makes us actually think in deranged ways, strange ways, and behave accordingly. Can we wield the internet? The power of the internet. Can we cultivate the wisdom necessary to wield the power of the internet appropriately in the modern world? That's the question. Because it is, as a tool, it is magnificent. You can learn so much. You can get a better education online nowadays than you could in college 20 years ago, say. The power of the internet is phenomenal. And coupled with that, the power of the filmmaking tools like cameras and tripods and laptops, the power of the technological devices that come along with what we view on the internet is immense. If we as individuals can adopt these devices and innovations and begin using them in such a way so as to create a sort of positive effect, we're bound to become unstoppable. Bound to. So this comes to the final point. Hard times create strong people. We're living in turbulent times, a transitionary period between worlds. We want to avoid dystopia and catastrophe, and we want to find ourselves being pulled by a third attractor and help push our way to that third attractor too. It will demand everything of you. This responsibility to cultivate the wisdom to such a point where we can wield the godlike technological powers we have developed and at our fingertips. That is an obligation for individuals in today's modern society. If we fail to consider it as such, we're probably not going to feel the urge to cultivate the wisdom needed. If we begin seeing the world for what it is and our power in this world for what it is, I can't help but think that we're bound to